Barry Fitzgerald. We're going to be talking ghosts, aliens, and angels. So sit back, and we'll see you in about 5 minutes. Grab your popcorn and snacks. Find a comfy spot, take a seat or lie down, and let me transport you to a place of fantasy, ghost stories, ancient legends, odd creatures, alien encounters, and other magical topics. You may even decide to join the conversation. From faraway lands to your own backyard, with a small dash of pixie dust. Turn out the lights and open your minds. The journey is about to begin. Good afternoon, everybody. We're on at noon today. I hope you're all having a great day. I know I am. My name is Charlotte. I'm going to be your host for the next hour or so. I'm also the owner of the California Haunts Paranormal Investigation Team. We're based out of sunny Sacramento, California, and boy, it's sunny, all right. Starting to hit the 90s. Yikes. I call it hell on earth. But anyway, my paranormal team is located up and down the state of California, Washington, and Oregon. We have 45 people in the state of California. So if you have a paranormal issue, I forgot to push my buttons. Look at that. I'm ahead of myself my buttons. So if you have a paranormal issue, give us a call. Give us a jingle. Send us an email. You can do it via the radio show, CaliforniaHauntsRadio.com. And we'll get it, and we will get to you. Okay? And we're not just out looking for ghosts, all right? We're out looking for things that could be causing the activity in your house. Debunking, doing that stuff. Because otherwise, it's a disservice to you. But anyway, we have enough people spread around the state that we can get to you no matter where you're located. So just like I said, shoot us an email. I am on Facebook or wherever you want to do it. Twitter, because we have a Twitter, we have an Instagram, all that good stuff. Anyway, my guest today, I'm really excited. I used to watch him when he was on Ghost Hunters and Ghost Hunters International, and he's an idol of mine. In fact, when I was first doing this, and as a paranormal investigator, you start gathering your equipment and all that stuff. And I remember it's pricey. People don't realize how pricey it is to be a paranormal investigator. All these things cost money. And one thing I wanted to do was be able to monitor the weather and the temperature and stuff in rooms. And I remember watching Ghost Hunters International and the way they did it, and I was so happy because they took these weather monitors for single, these single weather monitors, and then they would post them in rooms, and then they'd have the main controllers sitting on the command station. So I did that. So when I would go out, I had post-it notes on the main controllers to telling me which room they were in, and then I could watch the weather, temperature, the humidity in the rooms. So I learned that from Ghost Hunters International. But yeah, so I'm real excited to have him on, and so without further ado, let's do this. Hello, sir.
Charlotte, how are you? Thanks very much for having me on.
Thank you for coming on. Like I said, you are an idol of mine.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That's very kind to say.
And like I said, equipment's expensive, and you guys found ways on Ghost Hunters International to where you weren't. I mean, you were using high-end equipment, but some of it was affordable, which was nice.
Yeah, it was, and it often broke. So we had to think on our feet all the time.
Absolutely. So what have you been up to?
Well, I've been working away, writing books, still continuing the research, but the research has grown somewhat and has pushed the boundaries beyond the world of the paranormal to incorporate um, avenues of ufology, of cryptozoology, and folklore. And I really delved into my own country's folklore and mythology to understand what was going on and what our ancestors were encountering, and is it possible that whatever they were encountering is still on the land today? And I have to say that I've been doing the paranormal research for over 30 years, and in the 7-8 years that we were doing Legend Seekers, looking at studying our folklore, I've had more encounters and more extreme encounters doing that than I've had nearly in 30 years of simply going to someone's house looking for ghosts. And it reached a certain level where I said to my co-author, I said, if we ever come across that again, I'm done, I'm retiring. I don't need to be introduced to that. But it has been a phenomenal journey to arrive at this point.
Well, I can honestly say that I had my first case here in the U.S. that involved fairies.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And at first, when when my psychic came to me and said, it's fairies, I kind of looked at her and went, yeah, okay, whatever, because it's something
uh,
you don't like over here. You don't come across that all the time. We don't have that
yeah.
for the fairies over here. But
Uh-huh.
then the more I looked into the case and the more we did it, the more I went, okay, yeah, okay, I can see
Mhm.
it, fairies. But over there where you're at, there's so much folklore.
There's a huge amount of folklore, but we can learn from that folklore from the lists of material and documentation that has been left for us, and we can see the commonality between many of the different research fields and what we're encountering today. So it's nothing new that we're encountering. Our ancestors have been dealing with the same thing, but they left behind a well of knowledge that we have chosen to ignore.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now there's stories of children being kidnapped by fairies and
Yeah,
taken underground, and they've actually come out to talk about it, right?
yeah. There have been encounters that of course would go down that particular rabbit hole, um, and there are some children that don't come back, and sometimes, according to folklore, there would be a changeling would be left in its place, a copy, if you like, but not quite the exact copy. There was always something wrong with it, and shortly after the old switcheroo had been made, within about a month, maybe 2 months, that particular copy ended up dying, but the original child was gone. But there were ways in which we could defend ourselves against that particular type of phenomenon, and that defense also is the same defense that we tend to use within ufology, within the folklore, within the jinn, the world of the jinn, and the old gods.
That's what I found interesting when you were on the other show and listening to that, because I believe that.
Hmm.
I believe in all of that stuff. I also believe that there's an alien link somewhere in there too.
Mm.
That
Hmm.
there's deception going on, because after going through a lot of alien cases and stuff, or not going through but reading stuff, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of it that people are reporting, it sounds like ghost hauntings.
Hmm. Hmm.
Because
Yeah.
it'll get cold in the room. They'll come through the walls. Then I've always wondered about the EVPs anyway, because the EVPs, I mean, you get lucky, you get a class A every once in a while, but the
Hmm.
rest are either garbled or they sound like they're so far off,
Hmm.
like
Hmm.
another dimension.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the thing, from the research that we done, and the recent book that I wrote, The Deception of Gods and Men, it really delves into this particular aspect, and shows and exposes this commonality between a lot of the fields, and and also shows that the source behind the majority of this phenomena is originating from one place, and that understand, when we readdress our paradigm, our perception, to cater for that hypothesis, then things change, and we tend to get a different perspective on things. And I think, a lot of people who have read the book were concerned. They were saying, should we not get involved with this phenomena then? And I said, I'm not saying that at all. What I am saying is to be cautious when dealing with this phenomena. Understand that there is a high level, an exceptionally high level of deception when dealing with this phenomena. Something will come across and say, "Oh, well, I'm your great aunt Bertha," and we accept that. And there's something strange about the human race, Charlotte, that when we go into this form of communication and we end up establishing communication,
Hmm.
we could be told three lies and one truth, and
Hmm.
we completely ignore the three lies
Hmm.
and focus on the one truth and
Hmm.
accept everything that comes along. We need to stop that. If it has lied to you before, it's going to lie to you again, and it will lead you down the garden path, as we say here in this side of the Atlantic.
Absolutely. And what gets me is the people that use the ghost boxes.
Mm-hmm.
And they're so, and I hate to say it, because there's good friends of mine that use those things, but they're so desperate for an answer that
Yeah,
they take
yeah.
anything that comes out of the thing and they twist it. And
Mm-hmm.
even if it's a lie, they're going to twist it.
Yeah, and even when dealing with EVPs,
Yeah.
my wife who works alongside me, she came up with this fantastic idea that if we end up, say, with a quite a high level of EVPs, good quality EVPs, well, then we get people together and we sit in the group with a pen and a piece of paper,
Mm-hmm.
and we will all at the same time listen to
Mm-hmm.
the responses coming through the EVPs. And we all write down what we think we are hearing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing to see what we're actually not hearing. That is quite a thing to realize, and even EVP in itself, um, it can really play tricks with us. That our minds can play tricks with us with EVP, and start to fill in blanks where there was never meant to be anything filled in,
Mm-hmm.
and that can lead to all sorts of manner of trouble. And I go online from time to time and I have a look at some of the various different research teams that are out there, and they put up their EVP replies, and but they feel the need that they need to put the text underneath it so that we read what they're saying.
Mm-hmm.
If an EVP is not clear, we shouldn't be adding text.
Right.
If it's not, if it needs text, throw it out.
Yep.
And move on to the next one. It can get better, but we really need to challenge what's coming through the veil. That's the premise of this next book, and we got to challenge it, and we got to establish good contact rather than any contact.
Well, it's like you say. I mean, what I do if I get an EVP, I send it out to all my team members to see what they get. And it's
Hmm.
interesting. It's kind of like that whole like when I was in journalism school and in police, in police academy too. Somebody
Hmm.
runs through a room real
Hmm.
fast,
Yeah.
and then you write down what you see,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
everybody in the room is going to have something different. And
Hmm.
it's the same with the EVPs. Like you say, when you
Yeah.
sit in that circle and they instantly write the stuff down, you're getting all these different responses
Hmm.
as to
Hmm.
what
Hmm.
people heard.
Yeah.
And that's the problem with EVPs. Unless it's a really clear Class A, I mean,
Hmm. Hmm.
it's
Hmm.
pointless.
Absolutely.
Um, you were talking about aliens. We talked about aliens a few minutes ago,
Hmm.
and the deception. When you go back in history and you look at the Native Americans, you look at the Druids, and you look at all these different societies.
Hmm.
They all have similar pictures
Hmm.
and art that they've done. What looks like people with space helmets on and whatnot. Do you
Hmm.
think we've been getting these visitations for years?
Yes, the visitations themselves have been going on thousands of years, not
Mhm.
just something that has happened since 1947, since the crash of Roswell. No, that this has been going on longer than that. Even here in Ireland, we have access to our folklore within the island that goes back several hundred years, and we're able to see the stories there and access those stories that describe craft that we recognize today.
Mhm.
So this is something that has been going on for a very long time. The unfortunate thing is that they didn't have the language or understanding as to what they were seeing.
Right.
And I'll give you one instance in that at the turn of the 1900s, one particular eyewitness saw a ghost train come across the sky, which he described as that very thing, but without the engine. He just described a long silver carriage with windows in the side and
Mhm.
white people sitting inside. That in its very nature, we can easily identify as a cylinder within ufology.
Right. Right. Absolutely. The other thing too that bothers me about all this is that we, as the United, I'm not so much talking about the United States, but all over the world, we think we can handle this stuff. Like if the government's involved with it all, they're cocky to think, well, we can handle this. If they come, we're going to take care of it. Take care. You know what I mean? To destroy
Mm,
them. And the problem you got is that anybody that can fly from planet to planet like that, fly through whatever they're flying through, has the technology to hurt us bad. And so for us to be so arrogant, and set up communication or whatever they've done is crazy.
Well, the book itself also addresses that particular aspect because even that perspective of these creatures coming across the gulf of space
Yeah.
is not what it seems, and its origins are much closer to Earth than what we actually thought. And that in itself, that mask in which they hide behind, is one of the key deceptions. Because for us, whenever we were tracking the phenomena, we had to ignore the mask per se, and track it by phenomena. The phenomena remained the same, but the mask was ever changing, and sometimes twice in a generation. And by stripping the mask away, we were able to track the phenomena, and that led us back to the gates of Babylon.
Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. Do you think there's hybrids here on Earth?
To a point, yes. Alien hybrid. Well, I would seriously question that. I am not, by any means, and am I not saying that there's no other life in the universe. There
Right.
absolutely is. We would be very naive to think that. Um, but whether they're coming here is another thing altogether. The problem is, you see, within today's society, we have technology which we are creating, which is outstripping their technology.
Okay.
And why we're creating this technology is not necessarily to fight them, is to control us. But that's a different rabbit hole altogether.
Right. Right. So there's there's a lot of these little paths that you could go down, and just go down
Yeah,
for hour after hour after hour
yeah,
looking at
yeah,
this stuff.
yeah.
Do you think that we're being deceived? Do you think it's fallen angels and stuff that are coming here instead of aliens?
Fallen angels is another deception. Again,
Right.
it's another mask.
Another rabbit hole.
Yeah, you see what we tend to find, and this particular storyline was something that reared its head pretty early, but it was something that we were able to track back through the ages, in which you have one particular coin with two sides, and we are the human race are caught in the middle. And the biblical aspect of angels and demons was just another one of those stories that we get caught up in. And that in itself, you raise a good point, in addressing that, because archetypes are something that we create, and that in itself can cause problems. And angels, for instance, didn't appear, they didn't exist, I have to say, before 586 BC, and that was Ezekiel that adopted that within the Jewish religion, um, so that he could really drive forward this monotheistic idea of one God rule. Now, the archangels themselves were derived from Babylonian planetary gods. They were downgraded to angels, messengers of the one great God. So before 586, they weren't there.
Mhm.
But likewise, and this is another side, when we look at the other side of the coin, everybody who's anyone within the world of the paranormal is very aware of Lilith, the original demon.
Oh yeah.
Um, but again, whenever we start scrutinizing Lilith, we find that all is not as it seems. Archaeologist Dinama Beluzny, in her cataloging of Jewish demons, she notes that Lilith was a combination of two earlier Sumerian demons, Lamashtu and Datlilai. And that in itself just shows how far this goes back. Like, you're going back thousands upon thousands of years into the ancient past. These things have always been here. They've
Mhm.
always been deceiving us. And we, for whatever God knows what reason, we keep swallowing the same story time and time again.
Yeah, we do, and I don't know why, but we do. I think it's because it's like anything else. It's like people forget.
Mm,
As the centuries move, people forget. Like for instance, and I don't like to get political, but I know there's people that I've seen. When this thing in the Ukraine started, There's people I've seen online that have been complaining that we don't put our put that the U.S. and the Brits don't go in there, and the
Hmm.
UK don't go in there. Well, people forget because these people, this generation now has never lived through a world war,
Hmm.
so they
Hmm.
don't get it. So I think it's kind of like the same thing that as the years go by, the younger generations or the centuries go by, people forget about what happened like in ancient times with these deceivers.
Hmm. And the deceit even runs into the mainstream even today.
Hmm.
And my nemesis are the bright ones or the shining ones. They're something that have really gone to town on within the book, because these particular beings, they appear uh, usually above or within the vicinity of rocky outcrops or
Hmm.
stone plateaus, most notably in caves, of course. And
Hmm.
these beings will shed this God Almighty light. And of course, after the 20-second rule, which we've coined within the book, um, they have that hook and bait in us at that stage, and that's whenever these aspects of love and light and warnings for the human race and everything else is coming out. It's all BS from their standpoint. Um, to understand the shining ones, it's very very easy to go back and see the influence that they have had on us, because the shining ones themselves, they tend to appear around 10 years, around a decade before a major outbreak of war within the world somewhere. 10 years before war, they appear, and usually within the negative magnetic anomalies. And that's where we tend to find a lot of our businesses associated with that, high-end businesses that are making a lot of money out of war. So you tend to find that crossover and connection with the two. But um, the likes of Medjugorje was a perfect example. When in Eastern Europe, when this being appeared, the children were stunned to they weren't able to move. They were stunned with fear. That speaks volumes in the first 20 seconds. If you're
Hmm.
afraid of it, it ain't what it's portraying itself to be. And even Lourdes was another perfect example. When St. Bridget, when this particular being appeared in the mouth of the cave in Lourdes, and was mimicking what Bridget was doing,
Hmm.
uh, at the very beginning, in her own words, she did not identify this as being the mother of Jesus. Far from it. She referred to it as that thing. It was the church that took it and smoothed it out, and then it became later known as Our Lady. It was never Our Lady. These things are never there for our benefit, they're there for theirs.
Interesting. And I was just thinking too. I just because I do a Sunday afternoon read
Hmm.
session,
Hmm.
a certain book, the Mojave incident, and the woman in the story talks about these aliens that took them aboard their ship, but then
Hmm.
she also talks about the angelic aliens
Oh, yeah. Oh, God. Yeah.
that came to calm her down. But I
Hmm.
was like, seriously, they're shoving stuff up your wazoos and all this, and
Yeah.
then you got
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
angelic one going, "Don't worry, my child, it's gonna be okay."
Yeah, you see that there's another aspect to this as well, with the hook and bait,
Yeah.
is that once they have baited us, that's after the 20 seconds. What tends to happen there is that our minds, after observing the phenomena initially, our
Hmm.
minds are then being forced into the theta rhythm.
Hmm.
And that's the state in which we tend to go into deep meditation. That's the place where we tend to go to for hypnotic suggestion. That's also the place of false memory. That's where they need us into, and you tend to get this roll on effect from that, and they're not what they seem.
Oh, I totally believe that. I totally believe that. Now there have been a lot of encounters in the UK. I remember the story. I can't remember which Air Force base it was over in England
Mm.
when an alien craft had crashed. There's a
Hmm.
lot of stuff that goes on over there. What is there anything new that you're aware of that has happened?
No, I looked at that from our own mapping system, and it ended up in a negative anomaly. And what I tend to see is that that when you tend to have these two things going hand in hand and close to an air base, close to a military base, it tends to be their stuff.
Okay.
And we have to remember when you're operating on a black budget, not everybody needs to know what's flying over your head.
Sure. Sure. I always question, and I hate to say it, people that see like in Alaska, for instance, people that see the triangular craft, because
Mm-hmm.
I don't live close to it, but I live a few blocks away from an Air Force base here that they used to do repairs on the planes, and
Mm-hmm.
I remember seeing the B-1 bomber come in, and
Mm-hmm.
the stealth bomber,
Yeah.
and man, those things are spooky. If it's in the dark,
Mm-hmm.
they don't
Mm-hmm.
even have the little landing headlights on or nothing. They've just got the running lights on the sides. So I could
Mm-hmm.
see how, like you say, how that could be mistaken for for triangle alien craft.
It can be. However, there are other examples, of course, that we should also consider, which like the Phoenix Lights,
Hmm.
back on the 13th of March, 1994, I think it was, um, where and it was very very interesting because several of the eyewitness accounts were ignored in that particular aspect, in which when the craft passed overhead, and bear in mind these were not appearing on radar.
Hmm.
When the craft went over the eyewitnesses' heads, they saw the lights which formed the triangle clearly, but they also said there was no sound with it.
Sure.
And not only that, but there was this, it was like the surface of water rippling between them and the craft. Now
Hmm.
that spoke volumes because looking at this, looking at the bigger picture,
Hmm.
those things were behind the veil. That's why we couldn't hear them. That's why we couldn't track them on radar. But they came that close to show this is what we have.
See, now you talk about that veil. That's what I find so interesting, because there's EVPs that you get
Hmm.
that actually sound like they're underwater.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
And then when you talk about that veil that looks like water, see like I said, that's the stuff that makes me wonder what we're actually hunting as ghost hunters. Are we
Hmm.
hunting? Are we hunting deceased people, or are we hunting these aliens?
Well, again, aliens is just a mask to the
Yeah,
phenomena.
yeah.
Ghosts are a mask to the phenomena.
Well, that's the other thing too. I was just thinking too. I mean, there's reports that I heard that um, on a documentary that I saw where people have gone aboard these ships or whatever, and to be seated. I'm going to say that, and they
Mm-hmm.
realize that the person they're looking at that's supposed to be good looking and doing their business with them, it's a hologram.
Hmm.
That they're able to produce some kind of hologram over their bodies to look different. So, like you say, why not use this hologram for other beings, to try and make people relax and draw everybody in?
Well, it doesn't even have to go to a hologram. Once they've got you locked in the conscious brain, they can send you, they can show you whatever they want to show you.
Sure, sure.
So it doesn't even have to be physical. There are going to be physical interactions, of course. We know that, and we can see that from the seance rooms of old Europe, where these entities will appear partly in solid form, where you're able to touch a hand and fingers and follow the arm up to the elbow. After
Hmm.
that, there's nothing.
Hmm.
They can materialize. They have the ability to materialize, and they have the ability to materialize in daylight and darkness. So this idea that, oh well, the spirits need darkness to materialize, that's
Hmm.
BS.
Yeah.
Again, that's another deception. They can materialize wherever the hell they want to materialize. And that's something that we have to get our heads around about the deception. And when we detect deception, we should go at that with a screwdriver and dig deep to try and get down underneath that and find out what's behind it. And I can assure you, if something is there and is of a positive nature, it will have no problem in answering any further questions. But
Right.
if you detect that there's deception there and you go after it for
Mhm.
that, it will hightail it out of there. That speaks volumes.
And like you say, they're able to get into your mind and see in your mind. So I mean,
Oh yeah, yeah.
they're
Mhm.
gonna be whoever you want them to be. I mean, if you're in your house alone and you want to see your deceased mother and they decide to come, that's how they're gonna show up.
There is, yes, there is that, and also within the likes of ufology, you also have the observer effect, where you can have three people observing the same UFO, and three people see something different,
Hmm.
much like what you had spoke about earlier on.
Right, right. I find this all fascinating, and I agree with you. I mean, over the years as a paranormal investigator, my opinions on everything have changed.
Hmm. Hmm.
It used to be I was gung ho. Okay, it's Grandpa George. It's this. When you're in a
Hmm.
haunted building. But like I said, after putting after doing all the research that way, because I've been doing it 25 years.
Hmm.
After
Hmm.
doing all the research the one way with paranormal, and then looking at this other thing with the alleged aliens and all this,
Hmm.
my outlook changed.
Yeah, yeah. It gets very tricky when dealing with modern ufology because of the technology that we're creating,
Hmm.
and that is not being disclosed to humanity as a whole,
Right.
because that has become weaponized. So it's difficult for us uh, to really break that apart, but we can. There are ways in which we can do that, and that's something I'm going to be delving with the next book, in which we can start to target this and see, okay, where is this coming from? Is this ours? If it's ours, leave it. If it's theirs, let's go after it.
Now, when you talk about fairies and say leprechauns and stuff,
Mm.
they have no connection to any of this at all, right? Because they were here way before this started happening.
They do have a connection with it.
Okay, do
They
they?
are they are of the same origin.
Okay.
Mhm.
That's what I was wondering. I'm just curious about that.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's interesting to think. It makes a lot of sense. Even when you look at the Bible and you look at the pictures in the Bible of the saints, and they've got like the golden thing, halo over their heads.
Yeah, yeah.
It all makes a lot of sense because it's a helmet thing, for them to be wearing. And like you talk about Ezekiel, with the wheel and everything. I mean, it was happening way back when.
Mhm. Mhm. Oh, it has been for a very, very long time. But I think for me, it's again, it's about challenging what's coming through and also what we're calling on to help us. That's important
Yes,
that we understand the identity of
yes.
that phenomena, and bear in mind, like the old demons of Babylon. But when we use the term demons in Babylon, it's not what we see within Christianity today. Back then, they were known as demons for the Greek. These were beings that were also helpful to you. They whispered into your ear. They were the genius, if you like, of the seat of intelligence that inspired someone to do something. But if you were being troubled by a demon in your home in Babylon, you then brought in a bigger demon to deal with the lesser one. And we need to be very, very careful today that we're not actually repeating history.
Hmm.
We need to understand what we're calling in, what is the history of that we're calling in, and do we trust what is coming in?
You've done a lot of research. It's very impressive. With
Thank
this
you.
stuff. I've
Mhm.
just started to delve into it the last year or so,
Mhm.
and everything you say makes sense. It makes
Mhm.
absolute sense. Like you say, do you think, if things don't change and people don't wise up, that we're on our way to like maybe a confrontation with these things, or these things are going to try and do something to us?
Well, we always go through what history seems to show us is that when we start getting close to the truth, we go through this strange reset.
Hmm.
Now, there's a phrase we've been hearing for the past 2 years.
Hmm. Interesting. You think that this whole COVID-19 thing is part of that?
Well, who knows? Again, I don't want to get you taken off of the air,
Sure.
so I'll say nothing in that aspect.
Okay. Yeah, we're good. I'm okay. That's okay with that. Um, Now let's go back to your ghost hunting history.
Hmm.
And I know you live in the UK. What is one of the most haunted castles that you think is the most haunted castle over where you're at?
Well, I actually live in Ireland, but certainly from my perspective, one of the most uh, impressive castles that has got me to date, I would have to say, was down in Macroon,
Okay.
down in County Cork, and because it's not every day that you come across a castle that's haunted by a vampire.
Oh boy.
And that intrigued me. The history and folklore behind that intrigued me. And yeah, that was something. And then I eventually went down to the castle, and I was barely in it 15 minutes, and I had to leave. I says, no, I have to get out of here. And very, very strange place, very bizarre place. But there was stories of blood running down the walls and things like that. But a very and it's a very daunting castle, very challenging when you see it sitting on top of this huge rock. And but yeah, so that would be one castle that really stands out for me against the others.
Well, when you talk about a vampire, I mean, what are we talking about? Are we talking like a Bela Lugosi thing, or was he doing other stuff?
Not quite, not quite. You see, vampires are not new to Ireland.
Okay.
We have vampire graves from the 12th century, which are dotted around the island. And in fact, maybe 7 years ago, I was at an archaeological conference about 10 miles from my home,
Hmm.
in which a presentation was being held by the archaeological department that had uncovered this mass grave, and planted on top of the mass grave were two skeletons of vampires. So was it all connected? Who knows? But it was an absolute fascinating find from an archaeological standpoint.
Now, why do you think? Well, here's my question: how did they know they were vampires? That's my question.
What we tended to do, our ancestors, what they did, instead of using the stick through the heart, the Eastern European style or
Hmm.
Victorian style, we used large pointed stones, and they were jammed into their mouth,
Okay.
and that was seen as a prevention for them to return and want to consume.
Okay, that makes sense because I've also heard stories how people would lay big rocks on the bodies too, so that
Hmm.
they weren't able to rise.
Yeah, and that was also something, of course, that was also used with with witchcraft.
Hmm.
And Europe, of course, went through those horrible times of the witch burnings and everything else. A horrible, horrible time. But recently I came across some cuneiform tablets in from Mesopotamia that described particular practices in which you spoke about what you were going to do with the witch. And
Hmm.
this was the type of spell that was going to be used. Now, you didn't physically do this, which included drowning and placing stones onto the body, and things like that. And I thought to myself, my God, that was 3,000, 5,000 years before Europe then finally actually physically did that. And I thought
Hmm.
to myself, there's a wonderful example of things coming around, and these circles of knowledge coming around on itself and just being taken out of context.
And also when we talk about history and what people have to grasp, and I think sometimes in the United States it's hard for people to grasp. I mean, we're lucky if we go back to the early 1800s over here.
Hmm. Hmm.
I mean, you guys go way, 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 way back.
Well, I think in fairness to America as well, you have an absolute vibrant history, but not just the history didn't start with the settlers, the first settlers in
Hmm.
America.
Hmm.
The history was there, and in fact, a lot of the history was even forgotten
Hmm.
by the Native Americans who were already on the land. But you have the mounds of the Ohio mounds and things like that, and of course these ancient cities in the canyons and things like that. There was technology there that was beyond the norm, and in fact you have technology there. You had building styles there that we were using here thousands of years before. But
Yeah.
how did you guys get it?
Well,
You
yeah,
know, there,
that's
there's a big mystery. Were they coming across? Were they sailing across the Atlantic to get to America? Who knows? But it was thousands of years before.
or when you think about the birth of Christ, also because the Native Americans reported on that too. They were aware of it going on. So how
Hmm.
did that happen? I mean, like you say, what was it? These beings that brought the information forth, or was somebody sailing? And visiting the peoples?
Well, you see, whenever you start dealing with this particular type of phenomena, and you start using oracles,
Mm-hmm.
um, and in particular oracles in caves or utilizing stone, then you tended to have this communication that happened. And the majority of these places were hard to reach at the time. You know, you were talking about on top of mountains, or in cave systems, or on lake islands, or whatever the case may be. But these people were having these experiences. Sometimes there was an interpreter there. Sometimes you went and you slept at the location, and you got your vision, you got your guidance of what was coming through. But for the ancient Greeks, there were two different types. There was one known as the god of wilderness, which in itself, when we look at it at the description, that we would identify as Pan, this horn god, with goat hooves and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
That was one of these creatures that was said to come through. But the other one, which interested me greatly, was known as the Word. And the Word was very, very interesting, because when you encountered that, you tended to send in your priests or your rulers to these locations to get the information from these beings.
Mm-hmm.
And they ended up having a variety of topics discussed, which usually covered sociology, the rule of government, economics, warfare, crime, medicine, even engineering and science were
Mm-hmm.
all discussed. From this information, this knowledge was being passed from beyond the veil to here and now. But there was always a price came with that, because a
Mm-hmm.
lot of these areas tended to be within worship sites, ancient worship sites, where blood worship was occurring. So there was always a price that was being handed over for these issues. Now, roll forward to 1968,
Mm-hmm.
and we find that Douglas Aeronautics, they used funding to to uh, to use or they use funding to draw information through Ouija board sessions, which they believed they were
Wow.
communicating with aliens to get advanced weapons, or sorry, not advanced weapons, but advanced engine designs. Now, I should point out that I have the paperwork at home, the black and white paperwork that shows what they were doing. And I was highlighting red flag after red flag after red flag, because they didn't understand what they were messing with. But the topics that they ended up communicating with exactly matched what was happening back in ancient Greece. They were discussing sociology, government, economics, warfare, crime, medicine, engineering, and science. Same phenomena, different mask.
Again, it comes around. It goes through the centuries. It comes around. That's
Mhm.
fascinating. That's absolutely fascinating. How do you feel? People. Let's go back to this. Because some ghost hunters, don't like things like the Ouija board. Some ghost hunters don't mind it. How do you
Mm.
feel about it? What's your
Well,
opinion?
I don't think we should get lost on the Ouija board itself, because the Ouija board is activated by intent, and that intent is what opens the door. The problem that we face today in a modern society is that we don't close the goddamn door,
Yeah.
and it's being left open. Now, the moment that we go in there, even one person goes in there with a voice recorder, that intent is there. The
Sure.
doorway is open. Granted, it's a lot smaller.
Hmm.
But when you've got a Ouija board, you've got four people who are attached to that, which is now quadrupled the intent, the bigger the
Hmm.
door.
Hmm.
So we have to be very cognizant of that we have to close the sittings off.
Hmm.
And I know that there's a lot of folks out there will be hard resistant against the idea of occult practices and things like that. But we have to remember that what we are doing, and call it for whatever you want, but at its core, what we are doing is an esoteric occult practice. We're calling forward a being from the other side.
Hmm. Hmm. And that's something I tell clients, and I tell my team members, is that you might open that door, but once it's open, not everything nice is going to come through.
And the problem is, usually, sometimes we end up in a situation where nothing may happen,
Hmm.
but we leave that property. Well, there's no guarantee that something isn't going to come through 2 days later, 2 weeks, or 2 months,
Right, right.
because we didn't close the door.
And plus, it draws you in. Nothing may happen, or you might get a little bit of stuff, and the next thing you
Mhm.
know, you're going back for more.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Mhm.
Absolutely fascinating. Um, let's go back a little bit to the legends of the fairies and the leprechauns. What's one of the most recent things that you've heard going on like that in Ireland?
I've seen them. I've actually,
Okay.
I've
Talk about
photographed. I have
tell me
photographed
what
them.
you have. Tell me what they look like.
They're like you and me.
Okay.
They're certainly not like we tend to see in Disney, little Tinkerbell and things like that. That's nonsense. They certainly were not, and that's very very interesting. And I've a fellow researcher and doctor in the north of the country who also wrote a book called The Dark Fairies, and he made a point of actually stating that the idea of a helpful fairy is nothing more than wishful thinking. And from an island nation, we're very well aware that you really shouldn't accept anything from them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and when you're talking about them, you treated them with respect because of fear. You were
Mm-hmm.
afraid of the backlash that may come onto you, which is why we call them the good people. And a lot of these originally in their own essence, again, they appeared as shining ones, and we're back to these again. And when we push this back, there's a great book out there by Jeremy Black and Anthony Green, and they examine the Mesopotamian gods, and they were known to exude this light that was called Malam, but it was a light that was terrifying and awe-inspiring. And they also produced Nai, which was described as a creeping of the flesh. That is our immune systems, that is our fight or flight, sending out the adrenaline for you to move. That is a perfect example of our body's response, our innate ability to discern the true nature of what is appearing in front of us. We have 20 seconds. We need to start to learn to listen to that, because after the 20 seconds, that can be overridden by them.
When you there's different types of fairies for different things, right? You got your wood sprites and you got stuff like that. Can you tell us about the ones over in Ireland?
You tend to have various different types that were identified. Essentially, they're all coming from the same place. For in Ireland, we know them as the She.
Mm-hmm.
And that in itself goes part of the way in describing where they come from, because here we have great passage chambers,
Mm-hmm.
stone passage chambers that are dotted around our hillsides, and they predate the Great Pyramids of Giza, and we can access those 24/7, 365 days a year for the most part. But the those stone mounds are known as the She.
Okay.
So when we look at one particular entity, which I wrote a book about and re-released it there back in March, called the Banshee. This woman who cries and brings forward death. That's her. Yep. Um, when she the title itself, Banshee, Ban meaning woman, and
Mm-hmm.
she meaning which was derived as the fairy. That's actually not quite the case.
Mm-hmm.
Banshee means woman of the mounds, and she even in herself in I think it was 1245 AD when she was encountered, she said, "I am not of the fairy, but I am of the um, I am of the she." I can't remember now. I've forgotten. It's been that long ago. But it was something. It was something like she belonged to the mounds. She came through the mounds, but she was of the tribes of hell. And even that aspect of hell has a different lineage than what we perceive it to be within modern Christianity.
How?
So
How so? How so?
because in the Nordic traditions, pre-Christian traditions, when the body was going through this state of death,
Mm-hmm.
the spirit left. The spirit was gone, and it ended up going to this place. It went through this gate, and into this beautiful grassy valley with flowers and everything else, and people there that was ready to meet you, and it was all a wonderful, beautiful place. Today we recognize that as heaven, of course, where you go through these large gates and into this beautiful valley place, with grass and vibrant colors and everything else. But in the Norse traditions, that place was called Hela, whose god who oversaw it, which was her job title, was also Hela, but also derived from hell. Hell in itself was seen as a place. It was a halfway point. So when you reached there, then it was like a bus station. You had a certain period there in which then you found out where you were going next. Whereas the soul ended up going to a different place altogether. It went to this place of nothing. What I suppose within Christianity, although Christianity pulled it recently, they said there's no such thing as purgatory. That's actually not quite right, because the ancient texts speak of this place of nothing. And in fact, people who have experienced out of body experiences, like Robert Monroe, clinically, he was able to release himself and travel to this particular place, in which he described this vast body of water, just sheer blackness. And he says there was something in it. And that in itself were the things that come back to here. That's what we're opening the door to allow that back here.
Ew, yuck. So, going back to banshees, what
Mm.
does a banshee do? I mean, does it lure people in? Kind of like
No,
I was thinking, like the Greek sirens, or
no. What she does, she's actually. I had to tip my hat to her, because there was an ounce of empathy with the banshee, because when she comes to announce that there's going to be a death, there usually is this God Almighty scream, wailing that's being produced. You can't even describe it. Um, but but when she does this, the people around the person that's about to die will hear her,
mm-hmm,
and they will know that death is coming. But the person who is dying, they do not hear her. And I really respected that particular amount of empathy in that aspect, in which she didn't scare the people that were passing. She announced that death was coming. And when you do hear it, it immediately kickstarts your fight or flight. The hair stands up on your arms and everything else. This is not just a case of a fox in the backyard, or a hare being caught in a trap, or some lady out in the street having too much to drink. Nothing like that. Those things do not activate your fight or flight.
mm-hmm.
This is different. And the reason for that is because she's saying, pay attention. Death is coming.
So essentially, the banshee will come and get you for death, or let you know that you're going to die, kind of like the Grim Reaper over here.
Yes, but the people who are going to die don't know that they're going to die. It's the people
Okay,
around them that are aware that death is coming.
okay. The other thing I years ago, and I wish I still had them. Time Life Books actually had a series on supernatural legends,
Hmm.
and I had one for the UK. And one of the interesting legends on there, I don't know if you've heard about this, is if you look in a mirror and you see yourself looking over your shoulder, it's a sign that you're going to die.
Personally, I've never heard that one, but if it is in the UK, well then okay, possibly they have their own folklore and culture out there as well.
Yeah, yeah. I was just wondering if you had heard that one. I just find like the banshee, I find that fascinating. Because like you say, everybody else hears it but you, so
Mhm.
they're going to know you're going to pass.
Yeah,
Wow.
I've heard the banshee. I've heard
Have
her three times now, and it's a very, very distinct call. And once you hear it once, you will recognize it the second time. Though I could never ever try and explain it. What I just don't have the language to explain it.
hmm
And when the book was written, and the third edition came out in March, um, We interviewed people from around the country, including tourists that were coming to the island,
Hmm.
and I was very surprised to see within the modern age that she's still very active on the land today.
Hmm. That's interesting.
It
Very
is, considering, a lot of people will say, "Oh, it's just superstition. It's
right,
folklore." But the
right,
problem is, you see, we have to look at our own lifestyles to appreciate this, and understand why they're not encountering it. Because for many, we don't walk anywhere anymore. We jump into a car and we switch on the radio, and
right,
we disconnect from the outside world.
right.
And that in itself, of course, when you're out and you're walking around, and or maybe the lateness of night, and you hear her outside, all those years ago, it was a different world that they were living in.
Has anybody ever seen one?
Oh yes, I interviewed quite a few people who had seen her.
And how do they describe her?
Small. She would be. Some of them have described her no bigger than a newborn baby, but shrouded in this white. Again, we're going back to the Babylonian aspects of Malam and Nai, because you have to understand as well, those ancient chambers that were being built here in Ireland were being built by the people who came from Mesopotamia.
Hmm.
And I found references to a being, to an entity on in the cuneiform tablets that matched perfectly what we call the banshee today. So that would make sense as to why that came from Mesopotamia to Ireland, with the builders of the passage chambers who originated from there.
It does make a lot of sense. Now, when you
Mm.
say, and then the other thing that makes sense is when you say that, if you ask a fairy for help for something, you're going to owe them for something. That makes a lot of sense too, because nothing's for free. Even in the fairy
Well,
world,
yeah,
there's
yeah,
always
that's,
because when you look at when you look at the Christian religion too, Satan, when somebody makes a deal, when somebody asks Satan for a favor, he comes to collect.
yeah. We need to be very, very careful the way that we ask for things. And there was a while ago, there was a very famous book there was released about how you address the universe, and ask the universe for whatever it is you're looking for to manifest. We need to be very, very careful of that and understand the origins to that, because we were told, oh, this was a great secret, and it was being passed between certain individuals. No, it wasn't. 2,000 years ago, it was known as a Grinhold by the Druids. They knew about it 2,000 years ago. This is not a secret. This is an esoteric practice, but you
Hmm.
have to understand where it's coming from. And the other aspect to the asking is that when we ask and we receive,
Hmm.
we accept the deal. So therefore, when the price for that is demanded months or years down the line, it's too late.
Right, 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 right.
And
Um,
not, very rarely do these books cover the cost of
right.
asking.
Absolutely. Now let's talk about it a little bit because we kind of talked about that real quick towards the end here. People that encounter these things, people that encounter demons or whatever when they're out, even ghost hunting, they don't realize that it may not happen right away. Where you get affected, it could be like 4 or 5 years down, like you say, 4 or 5 years down the line, that whatever you encountered is going to start bothering you, like you could end up with heart trouble or whatever, right? I mean,
Mhm, mhm.
yeah,
Yeah, it can put you onto the slow burner, and take its time. If you have a healthy immune system, in particular, it can take a long time for that attachment to really secure itself, and get under the skin, so to speak. But my one of my other books, the Influence, it deals with that particular type of phenomena, about how to spot that, and what it's doing to us on a biological level, and how we can turn that around, and shake that off.
now for somebody that, when we talk about closing the door, what's a good way for somebody to close the door, like coming out of a haunted location, you don't want something to follow you home or whatever. How do you do that? Or you know
Um, if they're following you home, it's already too late. But to close the door to the communication so that nothing else is coming through, it's the same way that you opened it. It's all based on intent and how you visualize that door closing.
Okay, okay. Yeah, because what we do is we'll just stand there and say, "Look, you can't come with us. Stay here.
Hmm.
This is where you belong."
Hmm.
Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
As a ghost hunter, if you're going to be messing with that stuff, it's gonna happen. I mean,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Even today, I still have things that will track me home. Sometimes worse than others.
I agree with you, Barry. This hour went by really fast. I can't thank you enough for coming on.
Thank you very much, Charlotte. It was a great pleasure.
How can people find you?
They can find me on Facebook, and if anyone's interested in the new book, it's available in paperback, ebook, and audiobook. The audiobook session, I have to say, is fantastic, and they can find that on Amazon.com.
Fantastic. I would love to get you on again on a later date and talk more because this has been fun. And like I said, you're one of my idols. And wow, thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you very much, Charlotte. And you have a great week over there in California. And don't and remember to wear sunscreen.
Absolutely. Well, have a good one, sir.
All right. Take care. Bye.
All right, guys, that was fun, and I got to pick his brain. I mean, you don't get to pick somebody's brain like that very often, and that was great. He's a real nice guy. Tomorrow we're back on our usual time at 6:30 p.m. Pacific. We're going to be talking battleground ghosts, which means we're going to be talking about Gettysburg and different other places with Adrian Lee. So he's going to be with us tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. Pacific. And if you like the show, share it with 5 people. If you hated the show, share it with 5 people. Equal opportunity here. Also, if you're interested in ghost hunting, I've got a ghost hunting 101 class that I'm teaching on Saturday. It's going to be taught over Zoom. And I teach you the basics of ghost hunting. I teach you how to utilize the equipment in such a way that you can get clean EVPs and get real good clean evidence. And I also teach you like protocols, which can be used in a ghost hunting situation if you have a team, or in a situation where you're just going out with your buddies and going to some hotel trying to get EVPs. I teach you how to do that. I mean, we've done EVP work in hotels where they're singing karaoke downstairs, and we've still gotten really good EVPs. So there's ways to do it, but that's what I'm teaching. All right. Following weekend, I'm teaching psychic development level 1. Barry was talking about opening and closing the door. That's one thing I teach. I teach you how to open and close the door. So if you're interested in stuff like that, check it out. Go to the California Haunts Meetup. It's all right there. I'm probably going to be posting these things on Facebook at some point too, and on our website. Radio website, CaliforniaHauntsRadio.com. Check it out. It's got all our archives going back 2 years. 2 years. Plus, I've got some of the archives from when I was on Blog Talk. And that was like 5 or 6 years worth. So check those out as well. But again, we're looking for subscribers. If you're watching from YouTube, please click on the little ghost with the Sherlock Holmes hat on and the magnifying glass, because we're always looking for subscribers. The more the merrier. YouTube shows us no love, so we're hoping to just build our subscriptions and stuff over there. We got a lot coming up. I'm going to be teaching how-to classes, or not teaching, but doing reviews on equipment and showing you how to use the equipment on YouTube. I've got a video coming up for the next couple days here of me doing that with a REM pod. So I mean, it's going to be stuff like that we're going to be offering, and there'll be some free classes and stuff on there for ghost hunting and different things. And plus, I love doing this. I'm a journalist, photojournalist, and this is what I do. I love interviewing people. And if you go to our YouTube site or even our website, you're going to notice that we don't always do pure paranormal shows. We do other shows as well. We just did one last week on mentoring youth to keep them out of gangs and jail. I love doing stuff like that. It's what I do. So again, check us out. There's something on our YouTube, and all these videos for everybody. But anyway, I want to thank you all for coming today. Real quick, you see that ticker down at the bottom. That's because we act as a nonprofit. When we do this stuff, it's all for free, going ghost hunting, and even the show. And there's expenses for equipment and different things, and just like going to an old hotel to ghost hunt, we got to pay for rooms and stuff. So if you could find it in your heart to donate, that would be great. That's PayPal.me at California Haunts, or if you go to Venmo, just type in California Haunts, and we're right there. Anyway, again, I want to thank you guys for coming. I will see you tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. Pacific. And let me get to my little corner here. I'm going to show you Barry's books And I'm also going to show you where you can get his books and his website information so you can go check him out. Okay, I will see you tomorrow, and here's your info. Websites, charmstealer.com. That's Barry's website. And of course, the books are My Home is Haunted, Now What? And The Complete Approach. We've got In the Mist of Gods and Banshee. The Deception of Gods and Men, or Two Men. And the other book is The Influence. And of course, those can be found at Amazon.com. And again, I want to thank you guys for coming. I know we were on early. We're going to have this posted for later on if you want to rewatch it or listen to it. I'm going to be loading it up to the podcast tonight, usual time, 7:30. I'll be firing this thing off to the podcast. But again, I want to thank everybody for coming, and I appreciate it. And I will see you tomorrow.